This is my very first visit to the state of Washington and the city of Seattle. So I am delighted to be here. I understand it is the 60th anniversary of the World Affairs Council, and I think that makes it doubly more important for me to be invited in this year. The story of AIDS is now old. I think this is the 30th anniversary of AIDS with which we have lived. And most of what has happened is in the past. When AIDS hit, we in Africa didn't really know what had hit us. We reacted differently among ourselves, with ignorance, with panic, and as a result, some of us remained in denial for quite some time. I think it was partly because we also didn't know what we were supposed to do, what in fact we could do. So the first case in Botswana was in 1984, an isolated incident. People talked about it, and the person who died, who suffered from it and died, was a nurse. But before we knew it, a great many people were suffering from the disease. And by the early 90s, we were burying a great many people every weekend. But you know, the ironies of life, quite a few people prospered as undertakers. New undertaking firms were created and registered, and even coffin manufacturing started in the country for the first time. We were confused. We were afraid. So when I became president, it was at the height of the AIDS epidemic, people dying by the tens. And so it became a priority for me, even though I didn't know exactly what I would do. So I talked about this almost every day, and I decided that whatever else I would be talking about, I would not address a public meeting without talking about AIDS, because AIDS was cutting across everything that we were doing. Up until then, we were the darling of some of the development agencies, such as UNICEF, UNDP. You know, in terms of human development indices, we're doing very well. We were fighting infant mortality, the mortality of under fives, maternal mortality and morbidity were going down every year, and our life expectancy was rising. We had already attained 65 for women and 64 for men. But these indices, these indicators began to stagnate, then deteriorate. And I knew then that we were in really serious trouble. Now that's when I said that at that point in time, we were faced with the possibility of extinction. That I came also to meet the heads of the various pharmaceutical companies, because at that point in time, about 2001, 2002, then there was talk of antiretrovirals. They were new. There was also controversy about them. How useful would they be? Would semi-literate and uneducated people in Africa understand the regimen of these drugs? Wasn't there a danger of creating resistance and in fact creating another epidemic which would threaten the world? In our health policies, as a least developed country, we had placed emphasis and priority on public health and primary health care. We tried to build as many clinics as possible to ensure that every Botswana was within 15 kilometers at most of a health facility. Bristol Myers Squibb provided 100 million for all the countries of Southern Africa. We were the only ones who were ready to make use of it. So we ultimately used more than our share because the others were not yet ready. And also we were lucky that the biggest country with the greatest capacity was in denial, which was South Africa. I would say that all in all, by now, all our countries in Eastern and Southern Africa and Western Africa, the whole of Sub-Saharan Africa, we are all doing something about HIV and AIDS, using some of our resources, but according as we can afford it, some much more dependent on international assistance than others. And we have made some progress. For instance, we have virtually converted AIDS into a chronic ailment rather than the killer disease that it used to be. So that contracting the virus is no longer the death sentence. It was in the 90s and early part of the 2001 to 2006. It's no longer is the case. So what are we doing now? At present, I chair a group of former leaders like me. We call ourselves Champions for an HIV-Free Generation. Our concern is that as a result of the modest achievements we have made, we seem to we are behaving as if we have won the battle, whereas we may have won battles, but not the war. We have not won the war. And we cannot afford to let our guards down. So we go around trying to persuade all leaders to remain engaged. We have identified a number of factors as the drivers of continuing spread of new infections. And these include multiple concurrent partners, alcohol abuse, gender violence, and this, we feel that there has to be behavior change. And behavior change can only take place if both political, religious, and traditional leaders are involved. But also now, when we visit the countries, we raise these issues about sex work, about same-sex relationships, that they should be permitted and they should be allowed and be helped, because our overriding objective is no new infections, and that therefore any source of new infections should be plugged. And the way to do it is engaging with them positively, not negatively. I don't consider myself a gay activist. However, when some of our parliaments, as in Malawi and as in Uganda and so on, pass laws that want to criminalize homosexuality, we take issues with them. I write to them. Our hope is to change the attitudes of our people, but we as a group of half a dozen or so former leaders cannot do it. The people who are leading can't do it. And that is why we target the president, we target the bishops, we target the faith healers, we target the traditional mutimen. Africans will understand what I mean by mutimen, our traditional doctors, and so on. And that's what we are doing. We are, as I say, assisted in this by, and for which we are very grateful, by the health agencies I have spoken about, including and especially the Gates Foundation. On the ground in African countries, most people are still reluctant to test, especially the men. So what happens is that the women, because they become pregnant and go to antenatal clinics, they are automatically tested. If they agree, they are then treated. Then it becomes known to their husbands and the relatives of their husbands that they are HIV positive. And just because they are the ones who are tested first and it is known they are HIV positive, the families of their husbands assume that therefore they are the cause. So that is why we are opposed to criminalizing HIV infection for that reason. I must take this opportunity to thank Congressman McDermott because he almost single-handedly authored legislation and struggled with it for a period of 18 months, which ultimately became an act of your parliament, an act of Congress called AGOA, Africa Growth Opportunity Act. And I remember our ambassador was a man called Mogae. I don't know whether you remember him, but he was a group of ambassadors who used to meet with you. And that's why I also met you and also wrote to you to persist and persevere. And I haven't had a chance to be able to. I have acknowledged that fact and reminded people that I know the leaders in Congress who were responsible. But of course, we're also later very grateful to the Bush administration, which did not start AGOA. They inherited it. But we give the Bush administration credit because they expanded it to include some of us and extended it 5 times. As I say, one of my experts, the experts who work for me, is provided by the US government under that arrangement. Thank you very much. I'll be able to take questions hereafter.
I was in the State Department in 1987-88, and I traveled, I was responsible for the 26 embassies south of the equator. So I saw all of Southern Africa, and I had seen West Africa in 1961, so I've been in and out of Africa for 40 years. And actually, maybe it's 50 years, anyway, a long time ago. And there is no one who took a situation as bad as the one in Botswana and dealt with it as effectively on behalf of the people without becoming corrupted and becoming a part of the problem. This man is a real giant.